Welcome to Civil Discourse, a podcast where participants are free to share their ideas, empathize with other perspectives, and who intend to advance to a better solution to fix a societal ill. We will focus on topics that are particularly complicated. In a time where information is from sources more opinionated than ever, our mission is to find solutions and goals to accelerate the nation's progress with cultural impunity. I'm your host, Todd Furniss. Well, hello. This is Todd Furniss, and welcome to today's episode of Civil Discourse, hosted by Todd Furniss. I'm obviously Todd Furniss, your host. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe. We rely on your support, and we hope that you enjoy the content that we produce here. I am delighted today to have a very, very interesting person on the episode, something that you don't find very often, a delightful, young, aggressive leader in our community who is elected to run for office. And so I want to talk to Sarah Lamb about her ambitions because they're different and you don't find this every day. So Sarah, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me today, Todd.
You bet. So now, Sarah, I want to kind of lay the foundation for kind of who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. Because I would submit to the audience generally and you specifically, it's not every day you find a single mom of two running for office, for any office, but you haven't seen your 40th birthday, so you're still what I would call young and impetuous. So tell me, what motivated you to go do this?
That's right. You're right. We don't see a lot of single moms running for office. We certainly have a lot on our plates, but we know how to balance, dynamics of a family, managing a family household, a business, and providing for our future quite well. So, I'm an accidental candidate. I'm a California refugee. I moved to Texas in 2015. I got here as fast as I could. I really saw the value in what Texas had to offer, the foundation of faith, family, and freedom, which really is where I wanted to cultivate and start a family. And I started getting involved in the city of Dallas because I started to see things start to shift in a way that was very much resembling the state that I had left.
Okay, so hold on. A lot of stuff going on there.
A lot of stuff.
In one small introductory paragraph there. So I want to take that apart. So you grew up in California?
Yes.
Okay, where in California?
So I grew up in Northern California in a small town called Los Gatos. So that's actually where Netflix headquarters is.
Los Gatos is a beautiful town.
Yes.
Great little area downtown. I've spent a lot of time there, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very nice.
Absolutely.
And then you did what?
Went to school out there, went to San Francisco State, and then I moved to Texas in 2015.
And when you came to Texas, what drew you here? Like, how'd you say, okay, there are 49 other states. This one isn't working for me. I'm selecting Texas.
Sure. So I was married at the time. My then husband was from Ohio, a former Marine Corps. And he had his own business, was traveling a lot for work. And we had some friends in Dallas and fell in love with what Dallas was. Here you are in a big city, and yet you have all these neighborhoods that resemble the suburbs. And it just really felt like a community that I wanted to stay and raise a family. So that's where the draw was for me.
Very good. So you met a bunch of people, found your home, metaphorically and literally,
Yes.
And then you decided to get engaged. So how did you get in? Because I went through quickly your resume, and it's like every chance for leadership opportunity, you're right at the forefront
Yes.
of. So tell me how you decided to get involved in some of the civic stuff as well as some of the charitable stuff that you've been involved
Sure.
in.
So a lot of it is by accident. So when I moved to Dallas, moved and bought in Lakewood, on some of those beautiful tree-lined streets, some of the historic homes built in the 20s. And the street that we bought on was Gaston Avenue. And so my first really moment where I got involved with the community was when Mayor Rawlings was looking to rename some of our streets. And so one of the streets that was tapped to be renamed was Gaston Avenue. And at the time I had an 18-month-old, I was 8 months pregnant, and I was frustrated, right? Look at what was happening. I moved to Texas for a reason. And here they're going to go and upheaval everything that I had just kind of settled into. And so I wrote a petition and got 3,000 signatures and marched down to the task force meeting and was successful in blocking the mayor from renaming that street. The position I took was one of, let's slow down a little bit. Let's look at the fiscal impact and look at what the impact on the small businesses, the residents.
Wow. Okay.
There was one small business owner that had $15,000 of pre-addressed envelopes. I mean, imagine the cost to just the small businesses and communities. Our cities are very unique and they have their own history. And Dallas certainly does have its history where, we look at a lot of redlining and we look at, the building of I-30 and, what happens to South Dallas. And that's, our issues that we need to address are very unique to Dallas. They should not be caught up in, the unique nature of what's happening in another city. So it's all about taking a pause. Let's have a moment. Let's have a thoughtful discussion without getting caught up in what else is happening in another city.
Right. So you used another term in there that I think is important. South Dallas. South Dallas in the local lexicon has the opportunity to have at least two meanings. South Dallas historically is the area around Fair Park. Mm-hmm. And is that in your district?
Fair Park is not my district.
Okay.
It's just slightly out of the district, yes.
And then Southern Dallas, some people have mistakenly called it South Dallas, which is anything south of I-30. Sure. So just to make sure we're talking about the right things, I think you're really referring to Southern Dallas, yes, because it's a superset, obviously, of South Dallas. It includes about, if you can believe this, 60% of the landmass of Dallas County. It's a very large segment of our community, or of our county. So circling back, so that gave your start to local leadership. Mm-hmm. Here you are, a transplanted Californian, mother of one, second coming, and you said, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to take this issue on. And that led to other leadership opportunities for you, not because you built on that one, just because you can't sit quietly by while other things are happening that need some attention.
It's almost like God put me on Gaston Avenue, because the next time I got involved in a local issue was even a bigger issue than just a street name being changed. And that was when TxDOT tried to realign a state highway onto Gaston Avenue. And so then my next moment where I had to step up and help, at least have a seat at the table and advocate on behalf of our communities was when I took on TxDOT.
Because you said, hey, wait a minute, we're going to have traffic issues here. Kids can't play.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it was a dynamic project. It was 3 different city council districts. It was 3 state representatives, 2 state senators. It was a TxDOT and Council of Government-led project with Seat of Dallas bond money. So you had to kind of negotiate all of these different entities. It was sensitive because Gaston Avenue is the main connector between, west and east of White Rock Lake. There's really only 2 ways around the lake when you live in East Dallas. So, we had 2,000 people involved in that final public process and that conversation, which otherwise TxDOT really only likes to notify those within 200 feet of the intersection. So we really brought a bunch of people to the table back in 2018 and 19 on that discussion.
So you had to navigate and encourage and inspire and get a lot of people involved and then manage that process on a going forward basis. So how did you end up coming to run for the 114th? So just to be clear, for those listening, Sarah is a candidate for the 114th State District, right? So develop that a little bit and talk about how on earth you got the tap here.
I knew I was likely going based on my civic involvement. Coming out of the city council race in 2019, I was then appointed to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for the city of Dallas, Bryan's House, which is a nonprofit that helps children with disabilities in North Texas, and then involved with the Real Estate Council. I'm in commercial real estate. I knew I was probably going to be asked to run for something again. I never thought it was going to be anytime soon. I'd just gotten out of, divorce, and now I'm a single mom, and it really wasn't building my business in commercial real estate. And then in March, Jennifer Hoydu, who's the chair of the Dallas County Republican Party, her and I sit down, and the previous Republican nominee was removed for residency issues. So now they had an open seat where the party could actually put who they wanted to be on the ballot. And we sat down, and I she said, "What do you think?" And I said, I don't know. I've got to give it some thought. I've got to pray on this. And then I finally came around and won the nomination in July, and we announced August 1st.
So the election is in a couple of weeks.
That's right.
And you've been in the election process, the electoral process, for about 8 weeks, 10 weeks. A very, very short runway.
Very short. And what's incredible is, There was a little internal primary within the Dallas County Republican Party. I was essentially elected by the precinct chairs in House District 114. They're the ones that decided that, I was the best one to represent the Republican Party in this district. We filed with the Secretary of State on August 1st, and my opponent filed a lawsuit in the Supreme Court of Texas in August to try to have me removed from the ballot. His statement was that the party was not justified in being able to put me on the ballot, and so he made an emergency request to the Supreme Court of Texas to try to have me removed. So we got handed our first victory in September, the second week of September. So really, we've been doing everything we've been doing to get the word out on our race since the second week of September.
Now, why would your opponent be so threatened by you as a candidate? And just to be clear, your opponent is...
I'm running against John Bryan.
Who is...
So he did 7 terms of U.S. Congress, 5 terms as state representative, all before I was born.
Okay.
He's been out of office for a decade or so.
So we would consider him perhaps distinguished.
Yes, he's experienced.
And when he takes office, if I did my math correctly, it will be right around his 76th birthday.
I believe you're correct. Yeah.
Okay. So he would start his office, start his term at age 76, which would put him about the president's age. And so one would assert that maybe there's an opportunity for some fresh thinking to be applied to some of the problems we have, that some of which have been around for a long time, but some of them have never been around.
That's right.
So, for example, when he first took office, we were not even at faxes.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Much less the web, much less broadband. So doesn't mean that he can't think through those issues, because he's a very smart and capable guy, I'm certain. I haven't met him, but at the same time, the familiarity, the visceral familiarity you would have with many of these issues is going to be fundamentally different.
Well, and being a parent with 2 small children in DISD, we've kind of gotten past even other very important discussions. The ledge last session solved for CRT to an extent and solved for other things. Now we, as parents, still have to negotiate what materials are being taught in school and what our kids have access to. But our kids right now, coming out of COVID, are being given iPads as early as 4 years old in public school with access to YouTube. As a parent, we still have COVID protocols. So if my son leaves his backpack at home, I'm no longer allowed to drop it off between the hours of 8 a.m. and 3:15. So there's lack of transparency and access to parents with kids in public school right now. And these are things that really only a parent with children in public school would be aware of. And these are just the challenges that we have to face today that we need to reconcile.
So Mr. Bryan would have no appreciation for how vexing that might be, and therefore be less likely to take action to solve the problem than a single mom who's dealing with it every single day.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I would assume, I don't want to be presumptuous here, but it sounds to me like obviously education is going to be one of the big issues for you. Where did you start tackling that, or how have you started to not only see that issue foment, but also how do you think you can tackle it?
We have a $27 billion surplus down in Austin. House District 114 is really unique. It sits entirely within the city of Dallas, and it encompasses just 2 school districts, DISD and RISD. And I have great relationships with the local municipalities and those on the school board. So I think we have a really good opportunity, not just in the legislative session, but to work hand in hand with our independent school districts and make sure that, we have full access to what our reading materials are in our schools, that parents have a voice in terms of, being allowed access. We start looking at, why are we funding, if we have $8,000 that is given per child, per student for the public schools, why are we spending such a large portion on something like iPads, right? Which, for our children know how to read and write, it seems like we're spending our money on the wrong things, right? So we can sit there and really work hand in hand with these school districts, make sure that we're putting together, good principles that benefit our children and allow for more transparency.
So It's interesting. I've seen in passing a few times that people who have very prominent positions in technology in the industry don't allow their children to look at screens for sometimes at all, but certainly not before a certain age, and certainly also not for more than a certain number of hours per day. So why on earth would DISD or RISD think that's a good idea, or TEA? Why would they think that's a good idea?
Well, I think it's just I think we've gotten really comfortable coming out of COVID, right? The iPads were not something that was given or was not part of the curriculum before COVID.
Right.
And also, not having access to our kids on campus. It used to be that you could go and have lunch with your child, pop by. We had more parents in the classrooms as parent teachers, or assisting the teachers, if you will. And we've just really kind of settled into this new kind of norm post-COVID. We really need to sit back and evaluate, are these tools that we're given to try to get us through the pandemic, are they really something we want to keep around?
So we have to be thoughtful and intentional about it.
That's right.
Yeah.
We look at what happened after 9/11 and the safety protocols that we've now just come to normalize, right? Having to take off our shoes, going through metal detectors. These are no liquids going through, the airport. Those are things that we have kind of settled into because, there was a moment in time that was very prolific and, resonates with everybody, right? 9/11 is something that changed changed my life and changed everybody's life. And if we're not careful, we will fall into the same pattern coming out of COVID, right? Settling into, these new norms and policies that kind of inhibit our right to, have access and transparency. And we're giving up a lot of freedoms that we don't need to.
That's a good way of thinking about it. And it's very, very difficult whenever an agency, a department, or a legislative body put a rule in place to get the rule removed. And so trying to get ahead of that, or at least tackle it as quickly as possible, is critical. So what other issues are at the forefront for you?
Public safety is a huge one. From little things like our catalytic converters being stolen to long response times. Our Dallas Police Department is 500 to 1,000 officers short, and 29% of their current force actually qualifies for retirement. Coming out of the defund the police movement, we just need to make sure that we have legislators down in Austin that are supportive of our first responders, that make sure that the districts they represent have well-funded first responders and public safety, and we get our staffing numbers up where they need to be.
Well, that's a critical issue. I mean, we're seeing crime issues every day, and it's become a real problem, county-wide, not just citywide, but county-wide. So I think that's critical, and I think it's a problem more acute in the urban areas than it is the rural areas. But we've had some pretty aggressive things happen here recently that are not good. So public safety, education, is there another one that's top of mind for you?
I mean, there's inflation is a big issue. It's affecting everybody, right? As a single mom, I went to the grocery store 2 days ago, and $100 does not go very far.
Yeah.
It's hard to escape the grocery store now without spending $100, right? And I got 2 bags of groceries and no protein. So I think that people are starting to realize that their money is just not going far.
Right.
The cost of buying materials for school this year was $100 more for me to send my kids to school with enough school supplies and than it was last year. And I think every household is feeling that.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right on that. So the other thing that I think people are not typically familiar with is the reliance many families have on school lunches, other school meal programs, backpacks on the weekend, and so when people don't go to school because they're of COVID issues, they don't have access to those kinds of services and amenities. Is that something else that you're very cognizant of?
Absolutely. There's I can't even remember the statistics, but there's quite a few students, a significant number in DISD that rely on most of their meals coming from that program. That is one thing that came out of COVID, was DISD provides all meals for all students at no charge. So it takes away kind of that for those that are from kind of low income or less advantaged families. It's almost a level playing field, right? They get to have lunch and have the same lunch next to their friends in class, right? And I think it's an amenity that parents enjoy. But it is an issue that we need to start tackling when, there's a sickness from a child, and how do we get those meals to them? Seniors have Meals on Wheels. Maybe DISD can look at doing something to implement a similar program.
So in terms of what you're hearing from the other side, we've just heard the things that you're focused on. So education, public safety, inflation. What are you hearing from Mr. Bryan? What's he saying? I haven't seen any signs or any real notifications. Are you guys going to do a debate? Is there? So
we have a forum hosted by the North Dallas Chamber of Commerce and the League of Women's Voters on Tuesday at noon. So it's Tuesday the 26th. Sorry, the 26th at noon. I can't remember what day it is anymore. And so that'll be a side-by-side forum where people will get to come in and see the candidates and ask questions and see our policies side by side.
Where's that going to be held?
I'll have to get you an address. I think it's going to be at the North Dallas Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
But that'll be the first time that we'll actually be in the same room side by side.
And what is he campaigning on? What are his issues?
Some of the questions that came out when we did the Dallas Morning News interview together. He stepped up to run because he believes democracy is under attack, and he wants to have a good democratic voice and try to take the House back
So the State House.
The State House, yes. So that's what he's running on. I know that for him a big issue is pro-choice. He's 100% pro-choice 100% of the time on the women's terms, no questions asked.
With no restrictions.
No restrictions. So I think that is the big issue that he's running on.
And how do you feel about that?
I'm pro-life. I think that the heartbeat bill was a little bit firm. I think that we do need to have some exceptions for rape and for incest to save the life of the mother. Talking to voters, there are some challenges that they're facing. Women talking to fertility experts and how do they negotiate, the heartbeat bill and the trigger ban law that's now in effect, while working with a fertility expert, at what point with the embryo does that look like, how can they manage that, the embryo in terms of the heartbeat bill. So I think there's some things that weren't taken consideration in the last legislative session with that bill that we might need to just tweak slightly.
Yeah, these are really complicated issues, and we need to have a very, very thoughtful, well-established, comprehensive conversation around them, because much like you described, the use of the reaction to Ferguson as being impulsive, I think there's an opportunity, wrongly, for some of these other legislative initiatives to be characterized as impulsive. And we need to be really thoughtful because there's so much at stake. I'm not talking about politically, I'm talking about for the people involved. That is just very, very personal and important for every individual to be aware of and to take into consideration. These are not easy issues, and the nation's been grappling with them for a long time. So, as a young mother, I guess that's another issue that's especially given the age of your children, who are 3 and 6.
4 and 6.
4 and 6.
Almost 5 and 7. Yes. Okay. My daughter's birthday is actually on Election Day.
Oh my! Well, so now you have to decide what present you're giving her, right?
Yes.
Hopefully it's a win.
Hopefully it's a victory. Yes.
So, but these issues are really far more proximate to you and for you than they would be for a gentleman who's 76, for example, and is maybe considering the issues for his granddaughters or their children.
Sure.
And so, and to be clear, I think Mr. Bryan's had a long history of service and he's done some important things. So we can't be dismissive at all. I just think that what you're describing is important to highlight for the purposes of juxtaposing the way that each of you might think about things. And I think what voters should consider is, how would you think about things? You're always going to be closer to information and facts. And so I think the emphasis that voters should consider is, what are the values you're bringing to the table and what is the perspective that you're bringing to the table versus those of your opponent, so that they can rely on the way you make decisions as much as they rely on the decisions you make. Because you're always going to be in a position where you have access to, in all probability, more information. You may not have a tiny chance to look at it, but presumably you'd have access to more information than most people who are dealing with life in general.
Well, and I have a unique background in the sense that there's a few different lenses I get to look through, right? The lens coming from California, the lens as a mom with 2 small children, the lens as a board member for a nonprofit that helps children with disabilities in North Texas, right? I get to see our most vulnerable and we get to help them thrive. And then lens working with the city, I sat on the board of adjustment for the city of Dallas, hearing zoning cases, property rights cases on behalf of the city. So you get to see and work with the municipalities and see the efficiencies and see kind of firsthand how the city interacts with their constituents and taxpayers. And then the commercial real estate lens. Dallas is such a growth city with lots of development, and I'm on the retail side, so I really represent small businesses, and I see what their struggles are. Trying to open for business and the permitting process. So you get to kind of look at it from different lenses, and when you go down to Austin, these are all the lenses that I get to help legislate through.
Now, you also put your toe in the water in healthcare, right? Didn't you?
Yeah, I did. For a little while. In my past life, I thought I wanted to go in the medical space and dental hygiene space. So I also have that lens too.
So that includes bio and chemistry.
Yes,
and
I got an A in OChem. I did some pre-med courses back in California.
But I mean, my point is that it's a further dimension to the things that you're describing.
That's right.
It's not just purely proximity to the issue. So as we think about the nature of this election and the issues, it seems to me that we are all crying out for more women to be engaged. And you've taken the mantle on of being a single mom who's very engaged in civic organizations, been very involved in leadership activities. Let me just put the one challenge out there. How on earth do you sleep? I mean, you've got a lot going on. And I like to say single mothers, and mothers generally are the backbone of our community, our nation, quite honestly. They make 95% of all healthcare decisions for the country. But just managing time is an epic event. So how do you do that? How do you keep on top of it?
Well, I don't sleep much during the election. But it's really about, it's no different than running a business, small business. You build up a really good team around you of support. I have really great friends and family here, a lot of really good support that has been really helpful. And then on the business side, my commercial real estate side, I've aligned myself with really good partners and mentors to help me kind of carry the load a little bit during this process. But it's really just about managing your time well. You really realize what is important. I'm sure that I probably could be slinging a little bit more real estate right now, but I think that the future of Dallas and the future of Texas is important. And it's really just about, I try to be very good about picking up the kids early and putting dinner on the table. We cook dinner every night, sit around the table, because I think that's of those essential memories that you have. And you may just, I pick up the work after they go to bed, and, you schedule meetings kind of around, activities, and you just allocate your time accordingly. You prioritize what's important. And, I have a lot on my plate, but the things I prioritize are worthy of my time.
So, and you work with Alan Shore over at Retail Connection.
I do.
And,
Steve Lieberman.
Yeah. And I got to believe that they're really proud of you and what you're doing and very supportive. I don't want to misstate that. Is that the case?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I went to Alan when I was considering this seat, and I said, Alan, I think I might be doing this. And he said, well, how can I help? And so
That's a great first reaction.
Yeah. It was. I mean, he was my last meeting before I decided to take this, because I didn't know what they were going to say. But they've been really great over there.
Very good. Very good. So what is the roadmap of activities that you need to undertake between here and Election Day?
That's a good question. So early voting starts on Monday. We have several meetings. We have 2 block walking events this weekend. So we've got probably a dozen people on Saturday and Sunday. They're going to be knocking on doors in the community with me, getting the word out. We'll be poll greeting at early voting sites starting on Monday. Polls open at 7 a.m. They close at 7 p.m. So we'll be there meeting neighbors as they go in and cast their votes and continue to knock doors. And, we got into the race late. So we are still doing a little bit of fundraising. Campaigns are very expensive. So those are the priorities from here until November 8th.
So what do you think the campaign finance requirements are going to be for your campaign? Do you have an idea of what the total spend is going to be?
Sure. We've out fundraised my opponent. He has zero cash on hand.
Wow.
We've hit the $100,000 mark in terms of what we've raised in a very few short weeks. We probably need to be around $150,000. So we have about $30,000 more to raise, but we've got a lot of really good support around us.
In short order,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And your district is actually very large. Most people I don't think would realize that you start with an area in Dallas here called the M Streets,
Mm-hmm.
which comes right up against Central Expressway on the east side of the Dallas suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go all the way out almost to Garland,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you go east from Central Expressway. So it's a big area that you're covering. Is there an area that you're focusing on, or do you just have to get everywhere every day?
I try to get everywhere. I try to engage at the schools with the parents where it's important. The unique thing about this district is when I ran for city council in 2019, that city council district actually sits right in the middle of House District 114. So we have a unique opportunity here. But, it's really activating. There's a lot of people excited about this race. This race was kind of thought of before. I got it as kind of a throwaway seat, but we've got a lot of people that are energized. So I have precinct chairs that are out engaging their precinct. I have supporters that are out talking to their neighbors. We're trying to get out as much as possible and knock on doors. But it's a very diverse district. We have 32% Hispanic, which is exciting in this district. And we have a lot of young families, and we have a little bit of Deep Ellum, and we have 5 Points Vickery Meadows, which needs a lot of attention.
Yes.
So we have a lot of opportunities here to really kind of change things when we get to Austin and really help communities that are deserving and need it.
Very good. And so one of the things that comes across, despite the fact that all the things you have going on and the fact that you get no sleep, you still come across as pretty high energy, which if your opponent, I haven't seen him much on the campaign trail and haven't seen signs or ads and he doesn't have cash on hand, one could translate that into low energy.
Possibly.
Is that a fair?
Possibly. I've only interacted with him on the Dallas Morning News questionnaire. By the way, the Dallas Morning News endorsed us, which is huge.
That is very interesting.
Yes. I don't really think that they normally endorse. I think they're taking a leap. They're taking a jump. They see kind of what we can do and how we've been involved in the community, and I think they like something fresh and exciting, potentially representing Dallas down in Austin.
Now, the Dallas Morning News endorsement that's a big endorsement in that it is anomalous. It's a little bit atypical to get behind a candidate, I think, like you, given your background. That's very interesting.
It is. There's no. It's a fact. John Bryan has experience, right? He did 7 terms of U.S. Congress and 5 terms of state representative. He certainly would know what to do on day one. But I've been very fortunate to really align with members of the state House and Senate, and we have some good friends and allies already. So I'm confident that when elected in November, that we'll be able to hit the ground running and have the resources that we need to really move the needle and have a big impact in 114. This is a blue seat. They drew it in a way that definitely favored the Democrats. So, my opponent doesn't have to work as hard to try to capture the votes, but we're out there moving the needle. And I think that people are ready for a new dynamic, representation for this district.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for spending time with me. It's been really, really interesting to hear your talk, hear you speak, and to hear about the issues that are important to you, and hear how you're thinking about problems and the way that you come into contact with them. It's very tangible and very visceral. At least that's what I would observe. I really can't wait to hear how things go for you. I wish you the best, and I'm sure we're all going to be excited about your leadership in whatever capacity it is in the future. But thank you so much for taking the mantle. This is a big ask, and people don't realize how much you are giving up of your time to go at least try and serve in a leadership capacity. this isn't a money-making opportunity
No.
for you.
No, it's $600 a month.
Exactly.
You're a true civil servant.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And hopefully that covers coffee and gas to Austin. But although with gas prices going the way they are, maybe it doesn't.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for this. As always, if you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe. And we will look forward to seeing you on future episodes. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Civil Discourse. To learn more about today's topic or our guest, visit www.the60percentsolution.com or www.tfip.group.